developers. Then I lose count. Was that 4 or 5?
That was
I don't know. But develop. Welcome to developers times 5, Devx5, a twice a month developer experience teardown with myself, Chris Ward or Christian Schiller, and Ian Jennings. Would you like to introduce yourself, Ian?
Hey, yeah, my name's Ian, and I'm the founder of Haxor DX Testing, and we're here just to talk about cool APIs and stuff going on in the developer world.
And today we're going to look at something I'd never heard of, and you put it on the list of services to look into. I must admit, I just admitted this to Ian before we started. In the 3 minutes I spent trying it, I got surprisingly far. So that's a good sign, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm interested in this API. What we're talking about is called BannerBear, and it is a project created by a solo founder, which is what brought it to my interest, because often these API teams are massive, right? They're literally hundreds or thousands of employees at those companies. So taking a look at the DX of a API that was created by just one person, I thought would be really interesting. And this person is also publishing their revenue in open metrics, so we can actually see that they're succeeding, right? And I think that also adds an interesting take to it. So
I got some interesting follow-up questions to that, but I reckon you should just share the story first, because I'm already starting to get all sorts of thoughts triggering in my head here, which I think is a good sign, I guess.
Sure. Let me dive into the Indie Hackers post here. So can you see this?
It did, and then it dropped off again. It was there, and then you dropped off again.
Okay, let's try. Share screen, Indie Hacker, boom. Oh, maybe I click stop sharing. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. So the guy's name is John, and this is a report of them making about $8,000 a month. You can see that they're publishing their metrics here under open metrics, and right. So they're at about $15,000 a month. Before I get into the metrics, I just want to show you what BannerBear is. I think that makes a little more sense. BannerBear is a service for producing those little cards you see on Twitter, like the little image embeds and previews. What do they call them here? Auto-generate social media visuals, right? Banners, email images.
Bears. And they're not called bears, so I guess they're called banners.
But banners is kind of a weird old term too. Like I think of like an advertising banner.
But Ian, I think we're both at least in our 30s.
Yeah.
I'm second guessing for you, so I'm fine with banners. Let's go old school.
So we can see just in this teardown of the landing page above the fold here, right? There are the two sort of examples of what these things are, these assets are, which I'm not sure are totally apparent when you first land here. And then we have this code sample, which says post bannerbear.com v2 images, template podcast cover modifications, and then here are the modifications to that cover. Yep. I think something interesting about this just off the bat is you can't run this. It's not a curl command. These don't match either of the images that were generated, but it actually gets the point across visually.
Yeah.
So going further into this, you can see something I also find really interesting about this is the target is marketing folk, right?
Yeah.
And even though we're looking at API and integrations, and we have code right here front and center, as you go through the marketing page and onboarding, there's a lot of focus on integrations. And you can imagine, right, because marketing is not typically not programmers, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that's somewhat like kind of a cool theme here that I'll probably talk about a lot, which is this relationship between code and marketing. And you can see like in a lot of their assets, just the battle going on over like
it's interesting though, because for someone like me, and I guess for you, who are individuals with varying degrees of side projects that may or may not have become full-time jobs, who are kind of doing everything ourselves and marketing ourselves as well with a degree of technical knowledge, this immediately jumped out to me as being useful. And I saw things like Zapier integration and stuff like that. So I'm to be honest with you, I think it's really aimed at people like us, not general marketing teams. Maybe I'd have to look at the pricing to know that for sure, but that's the impression I got. But yeah,
Maybe we're looking at the growth hacker audience, right? Maybe that's when you ever see growth. That's what I think is like that kind of technical wizard person that is in charge of automatically producing these things.
Yeah. And it's something I could actually find myself using, I must admit. I use Zapier a lot for automating a lot of tweets, and invariably the default, so I'm using Buffer, which is another very well-known service, which actually has some overlay here because they're also very transparent about their income and budgeting. By default, the Zapier on Buffer will always just pull in like the first image it finds on the page, which is invariably not the right image. So if I could connect this up as well and get something much smarter that's dynamically generated, this is already ticking over lots of things in my mind, actually. But that's a very particular use case. This is the thing.
It's I've heard through a friend that this is a popular space as well. That these things are, you're starting to see this like. These services that produce thumbnails of like GIFs that represent the audio of a podcast being played, kind of like they have here, or going from audio to video or video to audio, like sort of this. I can't think of the name for it, but just transformations, basically turning something into something else to get more out of that marketing, right? So again, like I remember reading in the Indie Hackers post, so. Chris actually wasn't familiar with Indie Hackers. Indie Hackers is kind of like a blog or a community where people post their adventure in doing SaaS. And I remember reading that, I guess his name is John. He had first kind of just listed this as an API and then eventually found that this was the market case, which I thought was interesting. So like most engineers really just said, hey, here's the tech. And then, and then said, oh, wow, this is for marketing. And then he said he actually went and just made that the primary call to action everywhere, right? Automate and scale the marketing, automate the marketing, scale the marketing, right? So everything here we can imagine is actually organized by use case from top to bottom. And something I also really like about this API as we dive in is there's a really good sense of discovery where you really start off simple and get deeper and deeper. Like, again, like I'm saying, here are the high level integrations. You can see Zapier and then Airtable, and then it goes into signed URLs and query strings, right? So it's really goes from simple to complex. Before we get into I want to talk about the MRR and stuff just because it's fun. Before we get into actually trying it, you mentioned pricing, so why don't we take a look at that?
I was just looking because I just jumped this, and I must admit, for me, generating what I need to generate, $50 a month is a little too much, especially when I'm already paying for Zapier and all these other things. But their free tier is actually it's kind of hidden, which is not surprising. It's hidden in the FAQs, so you can use for free up to 30 images, which actually for me is, to be honest with you, totally fine. It's probably why they hide it, because I can imagine a lot of people would be like, 30 images, that's plenty. I'm not paying.
Yeah, well, that kind of sounds like once you scale, right? Because like for something like having these live streams, that would really be fine. But once you get into having those content streams, I guess 30, you probably blow through 30 quickly.
Actually, and I think I've just realized, I think that's 30 images total, not 30 images a month. So maybe that's less. It's actually interesting because I feel like this is a whole topic in itself. That maybe you know better about the whole pricing model. Like you see there, $50 a month for 1,000. I'm kind of like, can I pay 5 for 10? Because that's all I need. And I don't know. Sometimes the pricing things is a very big jump from nothing to a lot, and it's similar with a lot of these SaaS companies. I don't know. I know some insights on how companies arrive at these things, but I guess enough people are paying, though. We could actually do the math to figure out how many paying customers they have.
They have it right here, 240.
Oh, 240. There you go.
Yeah,
That's enough. Yeah.
This to me looks like a value-based pricing, because they're basically saying that this is not scaling with the price at all, and there's probably no cost to generate these things. So we're really looking at, I think, value on the images. But the interesting thing about video is very expensive.
Yeah.
So you can see the limits are very tight, and those are kind of scaling with the pricing. So it's very interesting to me.
I didn't even dig into the video side. I'd be interested to know what that's generating. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Cloudinary, and
Oh,
they
of
also,
course.
they're doing, very interesting too. They're also bootstrapped, so they I don't think they've taken VC funding, and they do video modifications. And guess what? They're massive. I mean, they are.
Yeah.
This is a very serious company, and maybe not as cute as BannerBear, but right, like it's got your 30 integrations. And so maybe that's also a good comparison to draw, right, between what this onboarding looks like compared to that of somebody who is right. So what's interesting about Cloudinary here is we don't have any Zapier integration, right? And we're probably working with the same customer, but we don't see those sorts of, right? Oh, here we go. Zap.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, this no code thing, which I must admit, that kind of came out of nowhere as a term, and there's a lot of services like Zapier that have existed for a long time before that brand existed.
Yeah.
But
I am conflicted whether that will be the end of your and I's jobs or the start of it being a massive industry, and I don't know which one it is.
Some of these things have existed for some time. Don't forget, it's just a different, like things like SAP and stuff. I think it's kind of what they were doing on an enterprise level for decades. I think it's a big industry in Germany. There's kind of workplace management type stuff, but it was at that kind of level, not our kind of level.
Yeah. Again, it's kind of like the small, right? Like we're talking about.
Yeah.
That small one person who's in charge of growth that needs to automate their stuff is probably what we're looking at, because again, also a larger teams can afford to make their own backend that does this anyway.
True.
Let's see. So let's go. I want to see if there's anything interesting on the metrics here. So you can see this took off about actually right during COVID. That's really interesting. I wonder if people started to. You know what? Actually, I read in his background that he actually wasn't sure if it was going to work at all. And then when COVID happened, like he lost some other source of income and really had to start driving marketing. Yeah. And I bet, a lot of marketing teams started going digital. So I bet there was just a total investment on both sides that led to that growth.
Timing in all sorts of ways. Yeah.
And this fella is coding 6 days a week. Another interesting thing he does as well is he does a week of coding and a week of marketing. So so I would bet that some of the empty week, or this is probably Christmas or something, but and he had a funny quote that he said, "I always feel like I don't get enough done in the marketing weeks," which is how I feel too.
It's harder to measure if it was, well, I think both are actually equally hard to measure.
Let's see if there's any. There's just conversion rates, new customers, about 30 customers a month. Follow my journey. I think we should dive into it and get started here.
Yeah, because there's something in the onboarding experience I really want to refer to as an interesting idea. So how about you?
Okay.
You jump in.
I'm going to go. There was no confirmation, I think.
I got one pretty quickly. I tend to always create an account. I don't like having things tied to Google, but
so I'll just go in with my Google, even though you're not a fan. Okay, so here we are in the dashboard, which I think off the bat is just super clean. Yeah. Like it's amazing to me how simple this is, especially again being built as an API. I'm not seeing a 70 SDK icons. You're really seeing again that choice between.
Yes.
Right.
And this is interesting. So if you go to the API button, it's probably the easier one to do strangely right now without having to. Actually, hang on a minute. This isn't what I saw. This is strange. This isn't
really
what I saw. I saw like scroll up. No, it's strange. I saw like
maybe the console when you go into
and then you have a test. project, go
Yeah,
into the
you go into a
test
template,
project. Yeah,
and
so
then
this
maybe,
is so this. Oh, you got a different one.
yeah.
So it looks like everyone gets a slightly different.
Oh, I actually made this project
Oh, you
earlier.
made this, but if you
Yeah.
scroll down, so this is something I wanted to talk about. So this API console, and then the image above it. The one I had, it was actually a different layout, which is interesting. So many years ago, actually about 3 years ago, I used to work for a company called Contentful, who are based in Berlin. Possibly people know them. They're one of these kind of, I guess, in tech terms, relatively old API-based companies, now done pretty well in terms of funding and customers and things like that. But we always struggled with trying to explain to people how the API affected something. How is me creating a content model in the WYSIWYG editor they had impact an API call, impact the final output in various formats, and vice versa in 3 directions. So we actually came up with something similar to this. And I've always been a big fan of these kind of interactive tools for onboarding. They can be challenging. So I really like what they do here, because you have, the layout I had was slightly different. The image was, oh no, you can see the image there, sorry. Yep. So, you can actually play with the API without having to set up anything, make changes, make it break, whatever, see the output in code and in image, and I really liked that. I'm a big fan of this sort of thing, and without me having to do anything, I can experiment, which I really liked. I couldn't get a PNG to load, but whatever.
This is really good. You see, it's not letting me break it. Like,
yeah.
the font is actually scaling down as I'm adding more text. It's really cool. I think that I actually think that for how simple it looks, and you go, oh, I could build that in a minute. I think that when you would try to build this or think about the back end, you would start to encounter these problems and realize how incredibly complex this thing is.
And this is something. So many years ago, I get the feeling I've already mentioned this on the one other stream we've done, and I'll probably mention it every other stream. When I was at uni, I went to university nearly 20 years ago, so it was changing times, and it was when UX was called human-computer interaction, the more kind of academic angle of it. And there was one term, the couple of things that always stuck in my mind from that, and there was one bit in particular which was abstraction. This concept of making something that is probably really complicated seem really simple. And this is a classic example of it. Like, it seems really easy to the point where we both think, oh, anyone can do this. But yeah, I bet you couldn't. But it seems really easy, which is why it's good.
It reminds me of back in the PHP days, there was this, I can't remember the name of it, but there was this, Image Magic.
Oh, well, it still exists. Yeah. Image Magic is still...
not in my mind, it does. Image Magic, yeah, there was like this, I got that backward on the display, but yeah, Image Magic was like this, I think one of the original like built-in APIs or extendable parts of PHP where like it mostly when you rented a cPanel style server or whatever, like came with Image Magic always.
Yeah.
And I remember doing this similar functionality in Image Magic, and I think of it fondly because it's one of those things like we're talking about where.
Can I be honest with you? I would hazard a very big guess that behind the scenes there is some Image Magic. It's pretty standard.
It's probably
FFmpeg for videos. There is a new alternative Image Magic that I've seen popping up more recently, but very recently, and it's very similar. It actually has backward compatibility as well. So I would
bet you that it is actually not Image Magic, and it is a Phantom.js browser taking a screenshot of a div.
I feel like Image Magic would be easier, but we're getting into the weeds now.
No. I think we should get into the weeds. Phantom.js. I bet you I find this. BannerBear headless. And you're going, no, damn. He wrote about Puppeteer.
Here we go. It says it right at the top. Makes use of Puppeteer. All right, you're right. Does Puppeteer use Image Magic? I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think it did. So the reason I think so is because I think that now maybe we're too in the weeds, but I think using things like Flexbox and different fonts and stuff is easier
Okay.
for
Yeah.
layout. But again, the thing that's cool about this is like I'm saying, is it's abstracted to the point where we just don't need to care.
Yeah.
And one thing I was going to say too about this generation is everyone's looking for that like Twilio magic, right? Which is when you finally understand what's happening. And he's doing a great job of showing you when I click this button, it's generating a thing down here.
Yeah.
And it's like you're saying, it's a struggle for every company. Every company I talk to is always trying to get to draw this understanding. And I mean, luckily this is very visual, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing something like API integration or, logs or something, or like real-time communication, it's much harder.
True.
Yeah.
True.
I want to back up and go just down to when we land,
yeah,
and talk about the flow. Like, I think this looks really simple, and I'm surprised this doesn't draw people away because of how like it looks like it doesn't have features. But I think that there's a good, like, oh wow, there's only like this looks like a prototype, right? But it's like, wow, like this. I think this is the result of market research and onboarding of like, what is, again, and really strategically thinking, what is the first thing someone's going to want to do when they get started, right? They're going to probably want to make their first, like, Zap, because that's easy, or they're going to want to do the API. They're going to want to upgrade, but not after they've done one of those things. And you're going to want to track the usage, but you probably will have wanted to used it first, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a shout out, which I think is so interesting because we don't see this in big API portals, right? We don't say, hey, opt in to more information and stay in touch. Like, that's genius to keep promoting this connection.
I actually feel like that's a nice, more modern way of looking at it. I feel like a lot of other companies kind of opt you in and you have to opt out. And with more modern
maybe that's true.
Sentiments with GDPR and the Californian equivalents, and as they're spreading, I think this is probably a modern developer just looking at it from that perspective as opposed to the old perspective of, we sign you up and then you got to opt out. You know? Yeah. But it's good. It's another one of those. I think something you've been reiterating is that lack of distractions, basically.
Yes. And then going into this page, which we kind of skipped by.
Yeah.
This is also incredible to me because imagine like this doesn't look like any other API portal landing ever.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of funny that like it's like, here's how you integrate with the API. Go get the key from your. Go get the key, send a request with authorization bearer. So this is our authentication step. And then use webhooks or use a sync or save. And it's just like so high level. And I think that, again, this isn't very helpful, but I think it's interesting to offer such a high level overview of how to get started without diving in, before like this is that split off page. When we were talking about Twilio, like, what do we do next? There were like different options, right? That was on the last cast we did. And here, there's also that split off, but it doesn't feel so overwhelming, even though it serves the same function.
I think it's interesting because it's one of those cases where you could argue that someone who is looking at an API kind of knows how to use an API. So maybe you don't need to tell them a great deal. Or maybe it's one of those cases just where the developer thinks, well, for now, this is fine. I will add a better experience later. But for the time being, that assumption is probably safe because it's an API. Why would you be looking at the API if you didn't have the vaguest idea what it was?
Well,
Whereas
this feels
compare
like
it to Twilio, which has all the SDKs and things like that. So there's 10 different ways you could be going down the onboarding path.
I think we'll see more of this, honestly. This feels like a book index. Like when you open a book and it's like, this book is for this, this, and this. And here's the 3 chapters on how to get started. And here's chapter 4, 5, and 6 on how to use those things. Like, this is like may as well be an ordered list of how to go from simple to complex stuff, like or something. I don't know. I'm super impressed by the decisions made here. When people reinvent the wheel, you get different answers, right?
Well, the documentation is there's actually a transcription feature as well, which is also interesting. It's one of those services that seems to dig further and further. And I've been looking at transcription services. So now I'm starting to look at that $50 a month as like, well, actually, there's a whole bunch of things here that maybe I'm consolidating into one,
So going into the API, we dive into the API. Again, we're getting another list of steps, like more and more high level stuff. So BannerBear serves and turns graphic templates into JSON. Your designer designs a template in BannerBear. It's interesting this is assigned to someone else. That's kind of interesting. Like the role, like you have a team and you have a designer is just assumed. Again, that's market research stuff. We turn it into an API, which is not BannerBear, but we. I don't know if I'm not going to break down every word like this. You use the API to generate images. And it's just interesting how that like BannerBear is a we and there's your designer. So there's a lot of parties involved in this. Okay, but just moving forward.
You may be reading more between the lines than is.
Yeah. No, I've been doing a lot of product market research, and you start to see how these things, like, this person has had a bunch of conversations, and probably on every phone call with a customer, they say, "Oh, I'll get my designer to design a template."
Okay, fair enough.
So it reveals what those conversations look like. Okay, we have authorization bearer, which I was confused by often. I think that this is, I'm critical of this, that it doesn't link me to these pages, and I don't know why. Like, why can't it?
I think because from as far as I can see, that API documentation is auto-generated, and it could be that whatever it's. Although I'm pretty sure you should be able to add links. I'm not sure. To be honest with you, that method they're using for authenticating is actually. It's actually it's one of the more straightforward options, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
It's one that doesn't bother me too much. It's not one of those ones that makes you go create an application, get a key, send that key, blah blah blah. Like there's a lot of APIs that do that kind of multiple steps. Whereas this, I quite like as a simple one. I'm interested to know why other companies choose other options as opposed to this one, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm also a fan of this. I think that there was sometimes people interpret this as authentication bearer, and there's this weird space here between the key, and those are common problems with this kind of weird syntactical problems with this one. But yeah, once you figure this one out, it's also the easiest to put into any library, and you'll see that later as we go down. I think it's interesting because they cover errors. As we go down into the example. Here we can see, this is a sample object. Let's go into create an image. You're seeing like, they just suggest using fetch, right? There's not even an SDK. It's just like, here's how you do this with raw JavaScript, but not an SDK, and also, but not curl.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm slightly confused by these examples. I'm not quite sure what they're showing. Yeah, it could be. This could be the async API, which is a new. It's kind of a new API pattern or protocol. I'm only vaguely familiar with it, and that could be what these things are because it seems, it seems more JavaScripty, these examples. So I think that might be what it is, but I think I would like to see curl, to be honest with you, as well.
I think we're seeing the diving into like, okay, you're going to need to know the errors before you get started because you're going to hit them. I didn't know when I was getting started with this, I actually wasn't even aware that this was going to be async, like you're mentioning, until I got to this point. And then it's funny because it's /sync and there's like the option to use a synchronous endpoint as well. So what we're talking about here is like you make a request to create one of those images like we saw earlier. And you can either be notified via webhooks, or you can wait on the request via synchronous operation. And I'm surprised that there's the option. I would think, judging by how we've gone from easy to hard, that we would just start with the synchronous and go into async if the request is too long. But there's both
I get the feeling that, and looking at the Puppeteer dependency and things like that, that the programmer comes from a very heavy JavaScript background, so it's kind of just that mentality. It's interesting as well because I'm sort of, it's one of those sorts of cases where I feel like with this service, I'm not likely to be using it inside an application. I don't think. I don't know. I'm not sure. I feel like it's something, I make a video that triggers that that runs a bash script or something. Like I'm not entirely sure where I would fit it into an application, but I mean, could be wrong. It could be using, putting that in a web-based application and stuff like that. I'm not sure.
I use this service to generate screenshots, I think, this is to actually resize images, and I use Earlbox to take web page screenshots. And this is often done. The cool thing about this one is you can actually generate these screenshots without an API at all, because all you need to do is supply your key and the page you want to take a screenshot of in the URL, right? So if you do google.com, bad token, but yeah. And so it actually is integrated at the application level. And I think that's why we're using fetch here.
Hard to say.
You're not convinced?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I just played around with the onboarding tool and was happy. So I kind of, but I'm probably, if I was to use this, I'm probably more likely to use it with Zapier anyway. I'm actually interested to see what options are offered there. I have had a few conversations with Zapier support, and who are very, very nice. And it's always an aspect of what does an application, as they call it, provide, and how is that useful? And often, so many times, you find I want to connect this with this, but then service A doesn't accept triggers or only is an input and not an output. So it can. I get the feeling with something like BannerBear, they probably are kind of doing everything because it's that kind of company. But
so what I'm doing now is I copy and paste that sample from the creating the screenshot. I put it into my console. I got an error that said I didn't have my API key, which makes sense. So I thought that was interesting too. We're not seeing that Stripe sort of like completion or account.
Not yet. I mean, this is still early days. One person. And as I say, I think most of this document is auto-generated. It's not hooked up to anything.
So we can see, there's like assuming you get this stuff, which I think is fair. Then once you run this, you're going to get this 404 not found. And if I open up the network requests, we can see the error message is actually helpful. The template is meaning I need to go into my template and grab the ID. I don't know what the ID is. Template, there we go. NXM, and that's also in the URL, which is cool. And if I go into my console again, I will clear it out.
I actually now have sound effects hooked up, but I forgot to set it up for the stream.
Okay, and there's actually a mistake. Well, not a mistake here, but fetch is async, so we need to await that to get an actual response. And we get the fetch stream. I need to Google how to turn fetch into a JSON response because I don't use fetch that often. There is a response.json, is that it? Body.json, is that the method we need?
Sounds familiar. I must have noticed after most of the time I looked this stuff up. Okay. Most of my JavaScript learning was done in jQuery days, and I still feel like I'm catching up. It's weird.
I think everyone's JavaScript was... I mean, it's moving fast, right? That's one of the major...
It's always moving fast, yeah.
Yeah, it's moving incredibly fast.
But that's such a cliche. I feel like we shouldn't keep bringing that up. People complaining about JavaScript moving too fast is...
it's a trope, right? Res body JSON? I think that's it. We'll do it. So this should get us the actual... Oh, I can't return.
Whilst you're doing this, I'm going to go and quickly experiment with the Zapier integration, actually. So...
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. While I figure out what I'm doing. There we go. We'll just copy and paste because we always know that works. Clear this out. I don't know what I did wrong, but... Oh, it's not body. Okay. Well, there we go. So we got the actual response here. And this is actually again, this is async. So this response that I got from the console does not include the image. What we'd have to do to even get started here is actually set up a webhook. Right?
So what did that just do then?
This just made the request, and I think if we go into the console, we'll see that. I actually haven't even done the console yet. So this just made the request to make the image, and if we go to logs, less than a minute ago, that's here. And now the status is completed, but we didn't get the alert because we don't have a webhook set up. Now, this is what I think is a huge opportunity for BannerBear, is because if I just change this URL like we saw earlier to sync, it's going to take longer. Notice how it's taking a long time. But eventually we should get the operation timed out. Wow. Because path to my photo is not real. Wait, it timed out here, but it did not time out. That's interesting. It worked yesterday. Let me try a different template and see if that changes something. I'm going to try this packet here. The idea is that this would actually create the image in the same request. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So now it actually returned the image, and that's what, as a developer, that's what I want, right? I want to see. Oh, that actually had quotes in it. I want to see it. I want the magic in the console first, right, before I do webhooks.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good onboarding for BannerBear. I think it's cool. We've also covered some of these other APIs that do similar things and how they work too, right? So what you're saying is, why would you integrate this in the application level? Because you could actually just simply write this into your React or Vue script, right? And then I'm assuming that it would be cached. I guess we could run it again to see if it's cached. No, not even cached. Is there a cache option? Okay, never mind. You're winning me over on this. I'm actually not sure why it would be at the application level now. Most of these work by caching. So the first user to load the page actually performs the operation and then further loads cache the result. Yeah, it's interesting to see the recommendations made here. Animated GIFs.
So I'm just quickly looking at the. Do
you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. It was actually pretty easy, and let's see what the result was. Hang on, I will. Dun, 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 dun. Where am I? Bum, bum, bum. There we go. So I just basically hooked it up with when there's a card in Trello, take the title of the card and create an image, and that was pretty easy. But I haven't actually clicked these links yet to see what they are. So let's see.
Well, that's really interesting because again, the async sync argument. Oh,
yeah, and that's basically that was the title. I didn't change anything else, to be honest with you, because not all my Trello cards have images. So, but that worked pretty easily, really. And I could obviously go further. Oops.
I wonder why you're not creating a request and then also making a second action that waits for the webhook. Considering how the API works, there must be some override that is allowing the request to take longer or something.
Yeah. I could then go further into buffer, for example.
Yeah.
This is the nice thing about using Zapier. I'm not exposing any of my credentials.
That never happens.
Although, actually, these are also very out of. No, but that's not particularly a problem. It's also they're out of date though. Bizarrely, some of those profiles don't even exist anymore. It's strange. Anyway, that's a Zapier issue, not a. So we have the URL, the URL JPEG, and URL PNG. I'm not 100% sure what the URL on its own is then, but let's go for the PNG. Oh, actually, you know what we should say? New tweet, and put the image in there. There's a lot of metadata here, which is quite interesting as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of it could be useful, I think, if you wanted to get really more complex with Twitter or whatever. So
All right, do it. I mean,
this,
we'll sign
well,
off
this will just
after.
go into my buffer, so it hopefully won't actually. It doesn't matter if it sends,
Gateway timeout.
but that's the
Yeah.
buffer. That's the
Oh, on
buffer,
Buffer.
though. Yeah.
Huh. Maybe your accounts are outdated.
No, this is definitely.
No. I mean, your Zapier credentials might, like you mentioned.
Hmm.
Oh, where? Huh.
Oh, and I see this sometimes. Sometimes you get errors, timeouts with buffer, and then it's actually there.
They're down or something. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. It's actually there already.
Oh, cool.
It timed out, but it just for some reason, yeah. So, yeah, that pretty much that does it. Basically, that's pretty easy. And of course, you could leverage a whole bunch of other things here. I'm quite fascinated to know how I could do this with the videos and things. Yeah, but that's pretty straightforward. This is how I'm most likely to use it, to be honest with you. Yeah, and I could go all sorts more complex here, I suppose.
I think that it's how most people will probably use it, right? Which is why we're seeing it recommended.
Yeah.
I had one last thing to share.
Sure, go for it.
Quick, yeah. So screen one. This is an interesting call out that happened on the first sign up. It didn't happen since I was already signed up, but
yeah,
they had these.
I saw that too. I think that's what might be what I followed actually.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting. Like it's really fun, but also it's sort of that, like when we did Twilly a lot, the other week, it was like, what do we click on, with all these options? And I think having that preference of like, this is kind of guiding you through. I just thought that was fun.
Yeah. I like it. So I think you had a couple of other points you wanted to go through. Let's just see. Actually, I think no, I think we basically covered everything.
Yeah.
Oh, so I talked about the contentful thing. Subject of buffer, of course, they have that transparent income thing. It's interesting because if you do the math there, that's basically $150,000, something like that, a year, I guess, which seems like a lot. But once you think that person is a contractor, and probably that's also operational costs and all this kind of stuff. Actually, it's not. It's interesting because I don't know if you remember, and there's a famous example of some of these, like the creator of Overcast, who also does the ATP podcast, is one of these developers that still manages to basically have quite a nice living on one or two apps, basically. And that was always the dream of the App Store and stuff, and then it kind of slowly dwindled. So it's interesting to see that kind of thing is still possible, but it would be interesting to know how when that becomes too hard. If you have 10 enterprise customers paying, I think it was like $400 a month or something, who want to call 24 hours a day and chew your head off, like that's hard to do with one person. And then paying people, that's when things get expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that earlier. I'm like, oh yeah, everyone, he just did an AMA, like on Indie Hackers. It's like, oh my God, you've done it, $150K a year. And like you're saying, when you look at that's just a software job, right? I think the most interesting part about that is the potential, right? Is that like, it's a machine that's already generated that. And as long as things don't break, it will keep climbing.
Yeah. You can just offer no support, of course, or just next day email support, and that's it. That's the deal.
Yeah.
So
I think also you're hoping that the customers you have grow, right, and you're going to they're invested and they're not churning, right, and so as they start to make more of a process, or their marketing teams grow, your revenue's growing. But you're totally right, because I mean, I also read. He answered an AMA that said, it seems like you're not married, you're 40 or something. It was really harsh. It was like a harsh, He's like, well, I work all the time, right? I'm working like 6 days a week.
Yeah, which is also is not sustainable. That's,
right. And then if you were to hire an employee, then where does your 100K go?
Yes, exactly.
So it's still a challenge, and I respect that. I mean, as you know, it's tough. I think though that there's a lot of potential, which is what people see in it, because it's how much work will it really be to add more?
And this is always been a fallacy of many of these sorts of things. My wife, going off at a tangent, my wife used to was part of the whole Etsy revolution when that was a thing. Okay. And there was an unsaid thing that everybody kind of knew, that at a certain point, you either became a generally woman sweatshop, or you had to outsource it. And then that wasn't Etsy anymore. What do you do? Yeah. And this is similar with everything. There comes a certain point where you're like, what do I become? You know?
It really is true. I think it's also difficult too with not low margin, but just at a $50 price point, right? Or like there's a lot of customers and it's cheap. So if you spend an hour answering an email, then you've kind of evened out on that $50. So it's tough. I mean, it's all business, and I think that's why we see, that's why venture and funding and all that goes there, because you really got to hit the scale before a lot of the math makes sense. Yeah. But it's still a dream nonetheless from a lot of people. Did your wife continue?
No, it just became so there was a period of time, I remember, actually before we left Australia, where we had a lot of orders for door snakes, draft excluders. I don't know what you call them in America. Things that block out drafts coming through. Yeah. And there was a period of time when, in the space of 2 weeks, she had to make 700.
No way.
And we got like friends over and all sorts of things, and it was ridiculous. And like the margin really was. And that was the point where she's like, "Yeah, I can't do this anymore."
Did you make 700? Did she make 700?
With help.
Wow.
With very, very good friends.
Wow. Yeah. Luckily, it's software, right? Well, that's the thing about software is the zero marginal cost, where
it's easier to scale it, of course. Yeah. To a point. Yeah, to a point. There's no AWS for door snakes. On that note,
or then she's outsourcing it to China or something, and
but that wasn't
that's a whole other thing, right?
This was the thing. Yeah. Anyway, that was kind of more of a past thing. I think the Etsy story has been dragged through the thing many times.
Yeah.
Cool. I really enjoyed that. It's actually an interesting service. I will look at it some more. I'm not sure if I can justify $50 a month, but I will see. How much time it saves me.
He's a solo guy. We're talking about how hard it is.
Yeah, I'm just a solo guy as well. And the stuff I'm using it for, I don't really make any money out of it. It's just for fun. There comes a point where I'm paying for Calendly, Zapier, and all these things. Like, is it worth it anymore?
Yeah. And then as a developer, we'll go make our own Phantom.js server and start to make our own rendering, and then
But that is just to clarify.
Developers are not good customers. Like, developers are not.
No. I know that, and that's I've worked in lots of developer-focused tooling. And your biggest competitor, if you're also open source, is usually your open source project.
Yeah.
People are like, why should I pay for it? And that is a whole other conversation.
Build versus buy, and everyone who's watching this probably knows about that too.
So that was BannerBear.com. I was actually pretty impressed with the whole experience. There's obviously, if you want to dig beneath the surface, you can dig beneath it from a product, but also from a marketing and company perspective, which I find quite interesting. I think it's a good case study for many people as well. Ian, if people are interested in knowing more about what you do, where can they find that?
You can follow me at Ian Jennings, but the E is a 3 because I'm Elite Haxer guy. Ian Jennings on Twitter.
Okay. And I'm chrischinchilla.com at chrischinch on Twitter for all sorts of other bits and pieces. And in this subject, if anyone is interested in giving me information and feedback on how they built their self-serve, basically what we just saw with BannerBear for their service, instead of having to do manual onboarding for each person who signs up, I'm currently working on a blog post on that subject. So let me know if you're interested in giving any feedback.
Yeah.
Yep. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe on YouTube. and leave us a comment and thumbs up, thumbs down if you like. It's better than nothing. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with something else. We haven't quite decided yet what yet, but So
And
until
we're also
then,
looking. It could be your product though, right? I mean, we're looking
exactly.
Yeah, if you want to come on the
Reach
show,
out to us.
and you can watch us painfully get started with your API while you explain all the decisions that were made along the way. We'd love to have you. And I think you were going to sign off, so I'll let you fulfill that.
Yeah, we need to get that kind of fake Steve Ballmer video, but it's like developers. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Right.